Hey everybody, welcome to Obscurities and Miniatures, and I've got a treat for both myself and you guys. I was going to do a video this Friday, if you're watching this when I posted it, because I post these Obscurities and Literature every Friday, because, damn it, I love books. And you guys may not enjoy these videos as much as me, and I don't care, because I'm going to still post them anyways, because like I said, I love books. And I had something totally else in mind, but then I stumbled across this. And this right here has very special value because this is honestly probably what kickstarted me hardcore into collecting, building, and really getting that lifelong interest in the hobby stuff, especially building gunpla, plomo, all that stuff. As you can see from the date, this is June of '88. Now, I don't know if I got it necessarily in '88, but it probably was somewhat near to that time. Because as you can see, this is right around the time of Char's Counterattack coming out. We've got the Garadoga variations here. And you can see this poor book has been very well loved over the years. I mean, this is what got us through for you old timers out there like myself, and for you newbies that didn't experience a world prior to the internet. This was kind of like the gateway drug. Now, I grew up with a local hobby shop that somehow or another purchased the entire stock of some Japanese store that went out of business, and the owner could care less about what he owned, and he used to have just stacks and stacks of a lot of the kits that used to be in these magazines. We're talking, late 80s, early 90s. And I didn't know a lick of Japanese at the time. Wouldn't be many years until I would. But, I already had kind of a passing interest in this stuff. And so when I saw these on the shelves, it just blew my mind. And, I know I got this one back at Mile High Comics when that was a thing back in California. I know they're still keeping busy. We're in Colorado, I believe, still. But this in particular issue has been with me for many years, and sadly, I used to have a collection of all the little pamphlets and catalogs that came with all those old kits, and I kept them for many, many years. And for whatever reason, I ended up tossing them all. And I feel bad because, a lot of that stuff, it's on the internet these days, but I knew even at the time as a kid, that stuff had significant historical value because, number one, the internet didn't exist yet, and number two, at least in a sense that we knew, but number two, I wasn't able to be there at that time because some of those kits were even older than what I was picking up at the time. They were, copyrighted early 80s and stuff. Old Dorvac kits, old Doug Ram, Gundams, original 79 stuff, all sorts of Aoshima, just insanity, just fun stuff. And so this, to me, is a really fun trip down memory lane. And some of this stuff, you're going to have to be extra careful because it's literally, you can see here, just coming apart. The very first of the SD Gundams for a whopping 300 yen. I want to say that I'm paying like 1,000 yen these days for the modern stuff. So inflation has definitely hit. Although I can remember even in college, some of the G Generation series stuff, when that was a big thing on the PlayStation 1 or 2, they were 300 yen kits back then as well. And if there's one thing that Hobby Japan has always excelled at, it's their photography of these kits. And I've long argued that Hobby Japan is the epitome, the bastion of absolute nerddom. And I say that with the utmost confidence and compliments, because nowhere else, especially back then, would you find a magazine so hardcore, passionately devoted to such niche, obscure stuff. And I think that's always been something that I've appreciated. And just even the paint jobs. I would sit there with like my old Gunze Sanyo paints that my uncle would pick up, and Humbrels and whatever else. He was all into the fancy stuff rather than like the enamel testers like my dad always did. He had those too, but I would always paint those at their house. He lived with my grandparents at the time. And I would always try to emulate a lot of these paint jobs and fail miserably, mind you. Obviously, a lot of this stuff was being done with airbrushes, which I had no access to. back in the day. And I had no idea what any of this stuff was. Like I said, you know, this is before I'd ever seen Char's counterattack, knew who Char was. I mean, I think I'd seen his name and started piecing things together just based on a lot of the various model kits that I'd built at the time. Man, I loved that original counterattack Gyarados. That was a great kit. It came with so much stuff in the Hobby Hyzak, which we see for like barely a second in the movie. I would stare at this picture. This made me want a Gyarados so bad, and eventually I would get one, but I think I might have built Sparkle Trouts for him at the time. I love how Sazabi-esque that one is. Old airsoft guns. And one thing that I always loved about these, even though I've never been a big military model fan, just the paintings. I loved looking at those. That's one of those things that I think I'll always have with me growing up in that era of, you know, hobby shops when the owners would reek of BO and cigarette smoke. And I don't think that's it's a unique smell, an old plastic that had been sitting in bags, you know, slowly decaying for decades, probably at that point. That's a smell that I don't think I've seen replicated in anywhere else but in a hobby shop. And I remember I stumbled upon one outside of a local train station near my in-laws' house, and it was the exact same smell that I hadn't smelled in like 30 years, and it just took me back instantly. And I loved looking at these old Votoms custom kits. Full-scale scratch build. There we go. Something you don't see as often these days. And I had no idea what the Blue Knight stuff was. I mean, this was eventually a story that they were serializing in Hobby Japan. And I want to say I picked up my first Votoms kit probably back in the early 90s, even late 80s, possibly at Comic-Con. But I mean, I can remember seeing these kits at like Toys R Us or something. Look at those high-tech graphics. Ringmaster, which I've never even heard of. And it doesn't look like any RPG I can recognize if it was like a... I have no idea who made this. Artwork looks familiar too. I can't place the artist. It's not a 80s or 90s Hobby Japan without some kind of, you know, fancy 5-star stories kit. Pat Labor showing up. Their various cyberpunk noir kits, and check this out. I love when they would have like the fan submissions. And it took me years to figure out that that's actually one of the characters from Live Man and good old Mazinga. But this is awesome. Now, at the time, I was already getting interested in like the D&D stuff, and they have this whole little spiel on the hot new items. Check out those sculpting jobs. Look at those sexy Empire guys, right? We've got a Grenadier Dragon tucked away in there. On the next page, we have this whole thing on the up-and-coming hot trend of metal tabletop figures. And they have a thing here that I guess Hobby Japan was putting out special catalogs based on the big companies at the time. Grenadier, Ralpartha, and Hobby Products out of Germany. I don't know who they are. What are they? What can you do with them? You can use them for so many things. Again, just looking through it, like all these old box arts. And here's another thing you gotta love about the old ones is the mecha porn centerfolds that often were included in these magazines. And of course, you'd have a lot of fan submission stuff. And trying to figure out what some of these kits were and model designs later on in life was always an exciting thing when I started putting two and two together. And like I said, here we go. This truly is a magazine for the most prestigious of nerds when you have, you know, all of the hand-drawn labeling and classifications of various airplanes. You knew somebody took the time to research and draw that, and they had fun doing it. Again, I couldn't understand anything in these at the time. It was just absolutely foreign and mysterious, and I just loved looking at this and trying to ponder, what was I getting myself into? It really felt like a secret club back then. Now, I mean, a lot of the military dioramas, you know, I grew up seeing all that stuff. We attended, you know, toy soldier conventions and modeling stuff since we were little. They have all the articles in the back. What is that kit? Right here. I'm quite curious. Number 14. I don't even know. Something related to, what is it? I don't see the name anywhere. Oh, it's Jiraiya. That's what I thought. Looking at the head, it looks like one of the... ninjas from that. I thought Jiraiya was later, but I don't know. It also says Dynamic Productions, which is Go-Nagai stuff. It's a fun time looking through all the latest kits. At the best part, though, the best part of all these old magazines, model cars, was in the back. Gotta love those SF 3D designs. Good old 80s junkie tanks. The best part of these were all the ads in the back for stuff that I had absolutely no way of getting. I loved pouring through these. But then again, you know, I grew up in the era of, you know, mail-away hobby catalogs. And what was always funny was, deep in the back here, they're really pushing their metal figure stuff in this too, which is kind of funny. And yet here we are, how many years later, and it still never really took off the way it has everywhere else in the world. What I was going to say was, it's always funny in the back of these, you always have your scantily clad, half-dressed ladies, without fail. And the further back you get, and depending on the years, they get even trashier, which is always kind of funny. Working in an animation intro job. Oh boy. How things have changed. All these soft vinyl kits. Soft vinyl Maddox 01. Now that would have been kind of cool to have. And look, the prices sucked just as bad back then. And you have to keep in mind, these prices back in those days were not cheap. I wouldn't want to be paying. I mean, 8,000 yen nowadays? Yeah, why not? Sure. Again, more ads for the 28mm stuff. Collector books. All kinds of price lists. I'm sure Mandarake's back here somewhere. The Traveler series. Here we go. That's a familiar face, I'm sure, to many of us. Anime-looking ogre. Vampire Princess Miyu was coming out at this time. So yeah, just, I don't know, a slice of history for me and probably many others out there. And just fun stuff. And it's cool to see just how much of this later on in life I would, you know, kind of come across again and be able to re-experience. And, you know, hopefully some of you had similar experiences. If you have, I'd love to hear them down below. Let me get all nostalgic this weekend. So if you have any fun reminiscence of things like this, your first experiences in those hobby shops of yore, discovering things that you had never come across before, by all means, I'd love to hear them. So, with that said then, this has been High Lord Tamberlane with Obscurities and Miniatures saying thanks for watching, and we'll see you back here soon. Bye-bye.